My boyfriend said that I loved my dog more than his kid. He judged my vet bills, wanted me to fund his son's vacation 50-50, that I didn't want, and belittled my choices. I broke up with him. My boyfriend Keith, he was 29 then, I was 27, and I had been together for just over 2 years when things started getting complicated. It feels like a lifetime ago now. Keith has a son, Dustin, who was 5 at the time, from a previous relationship with a woman named Jessica. They had a pretty standard co-parenting arrangement. Dustin would spend 1 week with Keith, the next with Jessica, back and forth. It seemed to work smoothly enough on the surface. Then there's my contribution to the household dynamics. My dog, Luna. She's a rescue mutt, mostly golden retriever mix, I think, with big brown eyes and an eternally optimistic tail. I adopted Luna about a year before Keith and I even met, during a time when I was feeling pretty lonely after moving to a new city for work. She wasn't just a pet. She was and is my furry shadow, my confidant, my constant companion. She saw me through job changes, apartment moves, and the general ups and downs of life. She is, without exaggeration, the center of my non-human world. Keith and I didn't live together. We both valued our own space, and honestly, the logistics with Dustin's schedule and my preference for a quieter home environment made separate places seem practical. I worked as a graphic designer for a mid-sized tech company, pulling in a decent salary. I wasn't rolling in dough, but living alone with just Luna meant my expenses were manageable. I could afford my apartment, my car, save a bit, and still have money left over for hobbies, occasional treats for Luna, and spontaneous weekend trips. Keith, on the other hand, worked in logistics management. His salary was comparable to mine on paper, but his financial reality was different. He needed a 2-bedroom apartment for Dustin, paid his share of child support and all the associated costs, clothes, activities, half of childcare when needed. It made perfect sense to me that his disposable income was tighter than mine. I never judged it. It was just a fact of his life circumstances, a consequence of choices he'd made long before I entered the picture. My relationship with Dustin was okay. I liked him well enough. He was a pretty typical 5-year-old. Bundles of energy, obsessed with dinosaurs and superheroes, prone to occasional meltdowns over things like the wrong color cup. I wasn't angling to be his stepmom or anything close. Keith and I had talked about this early on. I was clear that I wasn't looking to fill a maternal role. I didn't feel equipped for it, nor did I particularly desire it. I saw myself as Dad's girlfriend, a friendly adult figure in his life, but not a primary caregiver or disciplinarian. Keith seemed fine with this. He often said he appreciated that I didn't try to overstep, and respected his role as the primary parent when Dustin was with him. When Dustin was at Keith's, I'd usually spend maybe 3 or 4 evenings or parts of the weekend there. Sometimes I'd watch Dustin for an hour or two if Keith had an urgent errand or a quick meeting. We'd play board games, Candyland was a frequent torture, build elaborate Lego towers that Luna would inevitably sniff with cautious curiosity, or watch cartoons. I'd listen to his endless stories about kindergarten exploits. It was pleasant, but I won't lie, it was often draining. I'm an introvert, and the constant demands for attention and the specific energy of young children aren't my natural habitat. I never dreaded seeing Dustin, but I also didn't find myself missing him when he went back to Jessica's. Those weeks were my recharge time I spent focusing on work, my own friends, my hobbies, and long walks with Luna. Keith and I would have our us time then, quieter date nights, relaxing at my place without the background noise of cartoons or toy negotiations. This equilibrium worked for about 2 years. Then came the incident that seemed to shift everything, like tilting a picture frame just enough to make the whole wall look off. Luna, my sweet, energetic girl, started limping badly after one of our usual romps in the park. At first, I thought it was just a sprain, but after a few days of rest didn't help. I took her to the vet. X-rays revealed she'd torn her CCL, the dog equivalent of an ACL tear. The vet laid out the options, but realistically, surgery was the only way to ensure she wouldn't have chronic pain and mobility issues. The estimate came back. It was going to be around $4,500, factoring in the surgery itself, anesthesia, post-op meds, and physical therapy. I didn't even blink. Okay, maybe I blinked at the number, but my decision was instantaneous. Luna needed this. She relied on me. This wasn't optional. It was essential for her well-being. I confirmed the surgery date, rearranged my work schedule, and started prepping my apartment for her recovery, figuring out how I'd manage carrying a 60-pound dog up and down stairs for potty breaks. I dipped into my emergency savings, the fund I diligently contributed to precisely for things like this. It stung to see the balance drop, but the relief of knowing Luna would get the care she needed far outweighed the financial pinch. I told Keith about the diagnosis and the upcoming surgery. Initially, he was sympathetic, asking how Luna was doing and saying he hoped everything went well. He knew how much she meant to me. But when I mentioned the cost, just casually in conversation about having to tighten my belt for a bit, his reaction caught me completely off guard. His eyebrows shot up and he let out a low whistle. He remarked that it was an insane amount of money to spend on a dog. He wasn't mean about it, not exactly, but there was a definite note of disbelief, maybe even judgment, in his tone. He commented on how easily I seemed to pull the trigger on such a significant expense. I was taken aback. Luna wasn't just a dog to me, she was family. Spending that money wasn't a casual decision about a luxury item. It felt like a fundamental responsibility, like paying for essential medical care for any loved one. His surprise felt like a subtle questioning of my priorities, of the depth of my bond with Luna. It hurt. Trying to understand his perspective, maybe trying to find common ground. I asked him, somewhat pointedly, if he would hesitate to spend that kind of money if Dustin needed medical care. His response was immediate and slightly indignant. He said, of course, he would spend anything for Dustin, without a second thought. Then came the question that hung heavy in the air between us. Did I really think my dog was as important as his son? The question itself felt like a trap, designed to make me feel guilty or heartless. But I answered honestly, because it was the truth of my feelings. I told him that yes, to me, Luna was that important. She was my chosen family, my responsibility, the creature I had committed to caring for, heart and soul. Dustin was his son, his family, his primary responsibility. Luna was mine. They occupied different, parallel spaces in my emotional landscape, but the depth of my commitment to Luna's well-being was absolute within my sphere. That conversation marked a turning point. It was like a crack had appeared in the foundation of our understanding. After the surgery, which went well, thankfully, though the recovery was intense, Keith started bringing up money much more frequently, always in ways that felt pointed and uncomfortable. It wasn't overt criticism, more like a constant stream of jokes and comments that chipped away at me. If Dustin needed new shoes for school, Keith might sigh dramatically and say something like, "Man, kids grow fast. Wish I had a Luna surgery fund lying around," accompanied by a chuckle that didn't quite reach his eyes. If I mentioned buying Luna a new chew toy or a bag of her favorite expensive salmon treats, he'd often counter with, "Oh yeah? What did you get for Dustin this week?" Despite the fact that he never, not once, bought anything for Luna himself or offered to help with her expenses, even something small like picking up a bag of food. It felt like he was keeping score, comparing my spending on my dog to his spending on his child, and implying my choices were frivolous or misplaced. There was an incident where I bought myself a new tablet for work and personal use. It was something I'd saved for. When Keith saw it, his first comment wasn't cool or what are you going to use it for? But rather, nice. That must have set you back a bit. Dustin's been asking for one of those kids' learning tablets, you know. The implication was clear. My money could have, or perhaps should have, gone towards something for his son. It started to feel like he saw my disposable income not as my money, earned through my work and managed according to my priorities, but as a resource pool that he felt entitled to comment on, especially in relation to Dustin's needs and wants. This simmering tension boiled over during a conversation about a potential vacation. It was a rare, quiet evening at my place. Luna was snoozing at my feet, Keith and I were sharing a bottle of wine, and the mood felt relaxed for the first time in weeks. He brought up how nice it would be to get away, just relax somewhere warm after the stress of the past few months, referring vaguely to work stress, and, I suspected, the underlying financial tension. I immediately loved the idea. I started brainstorming possibilities. Maybe a quiet beach town, a hiking trip, something low-key and restorative. That's when he dropped the bomb. He said he definitely wanted Dustin to come with us. Okay, I thought. Maybe a family-friendly trip could work, although it wasn't my initial vision. But then he elaborated. He started talking about destinations specifically geared towards kids. Think theme parks, bustling resorts with water slides and character breakfasts. The kind of places that are essentially my personal nightmare. Places like Disneyland, or those all-inclusive resorts designed entirely around entertaining children. I appreciate that kids love those places, but the thought of spending my precious vacation time and hard-earned money on loud, crowded, kid-centric activities held zero appeal for me. Then came the kicker. He suggested we split all the costs for the trip 50-50. My mind did a quick calculation. A trip for 3, to a place I didn't want to go, doing activities I wouldn't enjoy, where splitting the costs meant I would effectively be subsidizing Dustin's vacation, paying for half of his flight, half of his accommodation, half of his park tickets, half of his kid-friendly meals. It felt less like a shared vacation plan, and more like he saw an opportunity to give Dustin a fantastic trip, funded in significant part by me. I tried to be diplomatic but firm. I told him that I didn't want to spend a large amount of money on a vacation experience I genuinely wouldn't enjoy. I wasn't trying to exclude Dustin, but the specific type of trip he was envisioning, coupled with the expectation that I'd pay half of Dustin's share, wasn't something I was willing to do. I suggested, gently, that perhaps he and Dustin could take that kind of father-son trip together, something special just for them. I told him I'd be happy for them. Then, perhaps if finances allowed later, Keith and I could do something simpler, just the two of us, even if it was just a weekend getaway close by. I reiterated I'd pay my own way for a trip I actually wanted to take, but I wasn't comfortable funding half of Dustin's expenses for a theme park extravaganza. He completely lost it. The relaxed mood shattered instantly. His face flushed, and his voice got tight with anger. He accused me of being selfish, of not caring about Dustin, of valuing my money more than his son's happiness. The argument escalated quickly, circling back to the old sore spot. He threw the question at me again, laced with more venom this time. Did I love my dog more than his son? And again, exhausted and hurt by the implication that my love and responsibility for Luna were somehow invalid or less important, I was honest. Yes, I told him. In the context of my life, my choices, my family structure as I had built it, I did love the dog I chose, the dog I was solely responsible for, more than his child, who already had two loving parents and whom I had entered the life of as a secondary figure. Luna was my family, my dependent. Dustin was his. The fight raged on for what felt like hours, dredging up all the resentment and misunderstandings that had been festering since the surgery. We talked in circles, him accusing me of being cold and unsupportive, me defending my right to my own feelings, my own priorities, and my own finances. Eventually, it just fizzled out into stony silence. He left my apartment early the next morning, barely saying a word, and he hadn't spoken to me since. So, here I am, feeling bewildered and wondering, am I the asshole for loving my dog, my chosen family, more than my boyfriend's child, and for refusing to finance a family vacation centered around him? More info. I feel like I need to add some context, because the initial reactions seem to paint me as some kind of child-hating monster who just tolerates Dustin's presence. And that's not quite right. My relationship with Dustin wasn't non-existent. It just wasn't parental. Like I said, when he was at Keith's, I was typically there for a good portion of that week. Maybe not every single day, but definitely a solid 3-4 days or evenings. We interacted. I wasn't just sitting in a corner ignoring him. We built elaborate train tracks that spanned the living room, had epic Nerf gun battles, where I usually lost, read bedtime stories, though Keith usually handled the actual tucking in, and I even taught him how to play Go Fish. Sometimes, if Keith had a late meeting or needed to run a serious errand he couldn't take Dustin on, I'd watch him by myself for a couple of hours. We had our little routines, our inside jokes. He seemed to like me fine. He'd often run to show me his latest drawing or tell me about a cool bug he found. What I lacked was that deep, unconditional, sacrifice-everything love that a parent feels. I liked him, I cared about his well-being, I didn't want anything bad to happen to him, and I enjoyed aspects of our time together. But did I feel that heart-wrenching pull? That instinct to put his needs above absolutely everything else, including my own well-being or Luna's? No. And I never pretended otherwise. He was in my life because of Keith. If Keith and I hadn't been dating, my path and Dustin's would never have crossed. My feelings for Keith were independent of Dustin. I loved Keith for who he was, and Dustin was part of his package, a part I had agreed to navigate in a specific, defined way. I wasn't his mom, stepmom, or even a dedicated aunt figure. I was Sarah, Dad's girlfriend, the funnish adult who sometimes played games and didn't enforce bedtime rules too strictly. That was the role we, Keith and I, had explicitly discussed and agreed upon early in our relationship. He told me he appreciated having someone who was kind to Dustin but didn't try to interfere with his parenting or his relationship with Jessica. The shift really, truly began after the Luna surgery incident. It wasn't just the cost itself, it was the realization for Keith, I think, of the difference in our disposable incomes and financial flexibility. Suddenly, my ability to handle a significant, unexpected expense became a focal point. It was like he hadn't fully grasped it before, or maybe hadn't let it bother him. But seeing me write that check for Luna seemed to flick a switch in his brain. His jokes became relentless and grating. It wasn't just occasional comments, it felt like a constant narrative thread. If I bought a new pair of running shoes, he'd ask if they cost more than Dustin's last pair of sneakers. If I treated myself to a nice dinner out with my friend Chloe, he'd text me something like, "Hope you're having fun." Dustin mentioned wanting to try that new pizza place. It felt like every dollar I spent on myself or Luna was being audited against a hypothetical ledger of Dustin's potential wants and needs. It made me feel defensive and resentful. It felt like he wasn't just commenting on my spending. He was implying my priorities were wrong, that my money had a better, more correct use, funding things for his son. This also highlighted, painfully, how little he seemed to value Luna, despite knowing how central she was to my life. His shock at the surgery cost, his constant comparisons, it all signaled that, to him, she was just an animal, an expense, maybe even an extravagance. He expected me to develop deep feelings and take on financial responsibility, even indirectly, for his child, while simultaneously dismissing the importance of my own non-human family member. He wouldn't have hesitated to spend thousands on Dustin, but he was genuinely flabbergasted that I'd do the same for Luna. Would he have offered to help pay for Luna's surgery if I couldn't afford it? Based on his reaction, absolutely not. That discrepancy hurt deeply. It felt fundamentally unfair. Regarding the vacation, it wasn't that I was inherently opposed to ever vacationing with Dustin. A cabin by a lake for a long weekend? Maybe. A beach house where we could relax? Potentially. But Keith's vision was so specifically tailored to a high-cost, high-stimulation, kid-centric experience that I actively dislike. Think sensory overload, long lines, mediocre expensive food, and the pressure to be constantly on and enthusiastic for a child's sake. He wasn't suggesting a compromise. He was presenting his ideal, dad makes amazing memories for son trip, and expecting me to co-sign and co-finance it. His insistence on splitting costs 50-50 for the three of us felt particularly manipulative. It wasn't about us bonding as a blended family unit. It felt squarely like him leveraging my financial flexibility to facilitate an experience for Dustin that he likely couldn't comfortably afford on his own. I get wanting the best for your kid, I really do. But expecting your girlfriend to bankroll it, especially for an activity she won't even enjoy? That felt like crossing a line. Let's be clear about Keith's financial situation. He wasn't struggling or destitute. He managed his logistics job well, earned a decent salary, paid his bills, and provided for Dustin responsibly during his weeks. He wasn't in debt, as far as I knew. But he didn't have a lot of fun money left over after covering the necessities. The bigger apartment, child support, Dustin's clothes, food, activities, contributing to savings, perhaps. We earned roughly the same amount, but my lack of dependence and my slightly lower housing costs, I had a one-bedroom, meant my discretionary income was significantly higher. I never, ever commented on how he spent his money, especially not on Dustin. That was his domain, his responsibility. It felt like a huge breach of respect that he didn't afford me the same courtesy regarding my finances. It's also probably relevant that Dustin's mom, Jessica, was apparently quite well off. Keith mentioned once, in passing, that she had received a substantial inheritance when her father passed away a few years prior. I didn't get the impression Keith resented her for it, but I did sometimes wonder if he felt a pressure to keep up, to provide Dustin with similarly exciting experiences or material things that Jessica could perhaps afford more easily. Maybe seeing my financial freedom highlighted his own limitations in that area, leading to misplaced resentment directed at me and my spending choices, especially on Luna. Finally, another layer to this is the living situation. We'd casually discussed the future, and I had been honest with Keith that I wasn't ready to entertain the idea of moving in together while Dustin was still so young. It wasn't just about my need for personal space. I worried about blurring the lines of my role. Living together would inevitably mean more shared responsibility, more daily involvement in Dustin's routines, discipline, and potentially finances. I didn't want Dustin to feel like a stranger. Me was suddenly imposing rules in his home, and frankly, I didn't want to feel like a guest or a third wheel in my own home during Keith's custody weeks. Keith had initially said he understood, but maybe, deep down, he hoped I'd change my mind, and my reluctance to blend our lives further financially, via the vacation, felt like another rejection of his family unit. Update 1. Well, for anyone who might stumble across this later, it's over. Keith and I broke up. The silence stretched for a couple of days after our big fight, filled only by a couple of terse texts about logistics, like him needing to pick up a jacket he'd left at my place. Then last night he called. I almost let it go to voicemail, my stomach twisting with anxiety, but I figured we needed to actually talk, not just let it fester. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, and it laid bare all the issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. It wasn't just about the vacation or Luna's surgery anymore. Those were just symptoms of a much deeper incompatibility. Keith essentially argued that my perspective was selfish and immature. He felt that now that we were a serious couple, his words, my financial priorities should naturally shift to encompass the needs of the family unit, which, in his definition, clearly included Dustin. He talked about how seeing me spend thousands on Luna without batting an eye, while he was carefully budgeting for Dustin's summer camp, felt like a slap in the face. He suggested, not subtly, that my disposable income was being wasted on frivolous things, like, apparently, my dog's health and my own occasional pleasures, when it could be contributing to something more important, namely, his child's experiences and upbringing. He tried to frame it as us becoming more integrated. He said that as a couple moving towards a potential future, we should be making financial decisions together. That sounded reasonable on the surface, until I probed deeper. I asked him if deciding together meant I would also get a say in his financial decisions. For instance, if we were pooling resources or making joint decisions, would I have input on whether Dustin really needed that expensive new bike he'd been wanting, or whether signing him up for 3 different extracurricular activities simultaneously was financially prudent for us? He balked. Immediately. He got defensive, saying that decisions about Dustin's needs and expenses were fundamentally his and Jessica's responsibility as his parents. He stated unequivocally that I wouldn't have a say in how he chose to spend money on his child, which honestly I never wanted anyway. But the hypocrisy was stunning. He wanted veto power over my spending, specifically suggesting my money should be redirected towards his priorities, Dustin, while simultaneously ring-fencing his own finances and parental decisions from any input from me. It crystallized everything. He wasn't talking about building an equal partnership. He was talking about me becoming an additional source of income for his existing family structure, without granting me any corresponding say or authority. He wanted the financial benefits of a partnership directed towards his child, while I was expected to sacrifice my autonomy and my own priorities, like caring for Luna. He wanted me to contribute to his side of the ledger, but keep my hands off his decisions. I laid it out plainly. I told him we could have one of 2 things. Either we move towards eventually combining finances, which would mean mutual transparency and shared decision-making on all major expenses, including his child-related ones, and that wasn't something I was ready for, nor did it seem like something he truly wanted in practice. Or, we keep our finances separate, in which case he needed to respect my autonomy and stop commenting on, judging, or trying to dictate how I spend the money I earn. He couldn't have it both ways. He couldn't expect access to my resources while denying me any reciprocal input or respect for my own commitments. He accused me of being cold, calculating, and not understanding what it means to be part of a family. I told him I understood perfectly well what my family consisted of, me and Luna, and that I wasn't willing to be treated like an ATM for his. The conversation devolved further, with accusations flying back and forth, tears on my end, mostly frustration and hurt, and a stubborn refusal on his part to see the fundamental inequality of what he was asking for. Finally, exhausted and heartsick, I told him I couldn't do this anymore. The argument wasn't just about money. It was about respect, equality, and fundamentally different views on partnership and family. It was clear we wanted incompatible things. I needed a partner who saw me as an equal, who respected my life choices, including my commitment to Luna, and who didn't view my financial independence as a resource to be tapped for his own pre-existing responsibilities. He, apparently, needed a partner willing to financially prioritize his child above all else, even her own commitments, without question. So I ended it, right there on the phone. It was incredibly painful. 2 years is a significant chunk of time, and despite these recent issues, there had been a lot of good times, a lot of genuine affection. But this divide felt unbridgeable. We deserved partners who were aligned with our respective life goals and expectations. Staying together felt like signing up for a future filled with resentment and conflict over these core issues. Thank you to the few people who commented on the original post and actually seemed to grasp the nuances. The importance of pre-agreed boundaries, financial autonomy, and the fact that I am not, nor did I ever agree to be, financially responsible for Keith's child. To those who immediately jumped to blaming me, suggesting I was somehow obligated to financially support Dustin just by dating his father, or that my love for my dog was inherently wrong or less valid, well, you confirmed my decision. Keith wasn't the only one with skewed expectations about the role of a partner in a relationship involving children from a previous union. He chose to be with me knowing my boundaries, knowing I had Luna, knowing my stance on finances and parental roles. He agreed to it all, until my financial situation became inconveniently apparent to him. I refused to feel guilty for upholding the terms we both supposedly consented to. Update 2. Wow, it feels strange revisiting this. Quite a bit of time has passed since that tumultuous breakup. Nearly 2 years now, actually. Life moves on in unexpected ways. First things first, the most important update. Luna is doing fantastic. The surgery was a complete success. After months of careful rehab, leash walks only, physical therapy exercises that she mostly tolerated, carrying her up and down stairs like a furry, spoiled princess, she made a full recovery. Watching her run full tilt across the park again, chasing squirrels with abandon, brings me an indescribable amount of joy. Right now, she's curled up on the sofa next to me, snoring softly. She remains my constant, my shadow, my heart outside my body. Breaking up with Keith was hard, really hard. Reading back my original posts, I sound so resolute, maybe even a bit clinical in Update 1. And I was resolute in my decision, but the emotional fallout was brutal. You don't just switch off feelings developed over 2 years. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, mornings I woke up expecting him to be there, moments I desperately missed the easy companionship, the inside jokes, the physical closeness. The internet often simplifies things. You see one side of a conflict and it seems black and white. But relationships are messy. I loved Keith, genuinely and deeply, despite the issues that ultimately drove us apart. The heartbreak was very real, a heavy ache that took months to start fading. Keith didn't make it easy initially. He tried reaching out several times in the first few months post-breakup. Texts, calls, even showing up at my apartment once, which I politely but firmly shut down. He wanted to talk, to apologize, sort of, to suggest we give it another chance. He'd say things like he overreacted, that he understood my perspective now, that we could work through the money stuff. A part of me, the part that was still aching and lonely, desperately wanted to believe him. My heart screamed, yes! But my head, clearer and more rational once the immediate emotional storm had passed, knew better. Those follow-up conversations, though painful, actually solidified my decision. Because beneath the apologies and the pleas for a second chance, the fundamental issues remained. He might say he understood, but when pressed, his core beliefs hadn't really changed. He still subtly framed my spending on Luna as excessive compared to the needs of his child. He still couldn't grasp the concept of financial equality in the way I needed it. He still seemed to view my independent life and resources through the lens of how they could benefit him and Dustin. Getting back together felt like willingly walking back into a dynamic that was fundamentally unbalanced and disrespectful to my autonomy and my bond with Luna. The deeper implications of our arguments really settled in during those months of reflection. It wasn't just about a vacation or a vet bill. It was about core values. Equality is huge for me. The fact that Keith felt entitled to have a say in my finances, suggesting my money should be prioritized according to his needs, or Dustin's, while simultaneously shielding his own financial decisions from my input, was more than just a turnoff. It felt like a fundamental betrayal of the partnership ideal. He wanted the benefits of my income without the responsibilities or compromises of a truly merged financial life. He wanted me to subsidize his lifestyle choices while retaining full control over his own. That wasn't partnership. That felt like exploitation, however unintentional he might claim it was. I realized I needed a partner who saw me as a true equal, someone who respected my financial independence and wouldn't dream of dictating my priorities, just as I wouldn't dictate theirs unless we explicitly decided to fully merge our lives and finances down the line. His dismissal of my feelings for Luna was another major point that festered. He couldn't, or wouldn't, understand that she was my family, my responsibility, a source of immense emotional support and joy. By belittling that bond, by framing my willingness to spend money on her care as foolish or frivolous, he was invalidating a huge part of my life and my emotional world. We were just fundamentally incompatible in how we viewed commitment and responsibility outside of a traditional romantic parental structure. I respected his love for Dustin. I understood that kids are expensive and require sacrifice. That was his choice, his reality. My reality included Luna and the financial and emotional commitments that came with her. His inability to accept or respect my reality, possibly fueled by jealousy over my greater financial freedom, was a chasm between us. Kids are a lifestyle choice with known financial implications. He made that choice long before me. My choice was a dog. They aren't morally equivalent, but the commitment I made to Luna was just as real and valid to me. Living through that breakup also forced me to confront something about myself. I realized, with startling clarity, that I am definitively child-free. I always knew I didn't want biological children of my own. The desire simply wasn't there. But dating Keith, I thought maybe I could be happy in a relationship that included a child, albeit in a more peripheral role. The experience taught me otherwise. It wasn't just about Dustin, who was a perfectly fine kid. It was about the inherent complexities, the unavoidable financial entanglements, even if only perceived, the shifts in dynamics, the compromises required that I simply wasn't willing to make. I realized I don't want to date a parent ever again. It's not a judgment on parents, it's a recognition of my own needs and desires for my life and relationships. I want a partner whose life path aligns more closely with mine, where building a future together doesn't involve navigating the complexities of co-parenting, custody schedules, and differing financial priorities related to children. Using the term child-free for myself felt like clicking a final piece into place. So what's life like now? Pretty good, actually. About 6 months after the breakup, I got a fantastic job offer from a competing tech firm. Better title, more creative freedom, and yes, a significant pay bump. The irony isn't lost on me. I now have even more disposable income, enough to cover several Luna surgeries if needed. Knock on wood. The career change was invigorating. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends I'd maybe neglected a bit during the relationship drama, took up pottery classes, surprisingly therapeutic. And of course, spent tons of quality time with Luna. We explore new hiking trails, visit dog-friendly cafes, and have perfected the art of synchronized napping on the couch. I've dipped my toes back into the dating pool a few times. Met some nice guys, had some pleasant enough dates, but nothing clicked. No spark, no real sense of connection or shared vision. I'm not actively searching right now. I'm genuinely content with my life as it is. My career, my friends, my dog, my independence. If the right person comes along, great. If not, that's okay too. I'm building a life I love on my own terms. Keith and I still share a few mutual friends, so inevitably our paths cross occasionally. Birthday parties, group dinners, that sort of thing. It was awkward at first, but we've settled into a kind of polite, respectful distance. We've actually had a few long talks, usually late at night at mutual friends' gatherings, sometimes fueled by a bit too much wine. He's admitted he misses me, misses what we had. He's expressed regret over how things went down, acknowledging, in those moments at least, that he mishandled the financial stuff and put unfair pressure on me. He sometimes hints that he wishes I'd reconsider. Hearing that still stirs something in me. I miss the good parts too. The connection we had, the laughter, the intimacy. It was special, almost magical at times. There's a lingering affection, a shared history. But those conversations also reinforce why it could never work long term. The fundamental incompatibilities are still there, lurking beneath the surface of nostalgia. I realized I want a partner whose life I can truly intertwine with mine, someone I want to build a home with, merge finances with eventually, plan a future with without these inherent conflicts. That partner could never be Keith. Not because he's a bad person or a bad father, but because our paths and priorities are just too different. I would never have asked him to choose between me and Dustin. That would be monstrous. A good parent should put their child first. I respect him for being a devoted father, but I also respect myself enough to know I need a partner whose life commitments align with my own child-free stance. We still maintain a level of respect. We're cordial when we see each other, but there's a shared, unspoken understanding that it's definitively over. Our hearts might remember the love, but our heads know the reality. I truly hope Keith finds happiness. I hope he finds a partner who embraces his life, including Dustin, fully and enthusiastically, someone who shares his vision for family and finances. And I hope someday I find a wonderful, child-free man who loves dogs, respects equality, and is ready to build a compatible life together. Until then, it's just me and Luna. And honestly, that's a pretty great team.